Do you remember the first time you felt emptiness? That moment when something inside you broke and the world, even though it was full of sounds, became silent. My first time was when I didn't even know how to tie my shoelaces yet. It was a random afternoon, and I was on my grandmother's lap, eating dumplings. The smell of sugar and cinnamon mixed with the warmth of his embrace. For a child, this was the whole world: security, sweetness, love. The next day, all of that was ripped away from me. I remember walking into the room full of flowers and people crying. My grandmother was there, but she wasn't there. Inside a glass box, or maybe it was fiber, I never discovered. She seemed more fragile, more distant. I turned to my mother and asked, with all the naivety of a child, "Mom, why is Grandma in a box?" My mother didn't respond. She knelt down and hugged me with a strength I had never felt before. To this day, I have never seen my mother cry like that. Tears that didn't just come from the eyes, but from something deeper, more painful. On the way back home, she stopped at a candy store and bought a huge box of tortuguitas. "Start now, son," she said, as if the sweets could erase the question that not even she knew how to answer. But is that what we do when we don't understand? Do we fill it with something sweet, something quick, something distracting? My grandmother, Donna Joanna, was just over 60 years old. She was the most alive person I knew. He told stories that made me forget time. He sang to me on sleepless nights, and he smiled like someone who had never known the weight of the world. One day, she was there, laughing. In the other, her Bible reading glasses were lying on the sofa, as if waiting for her, but she never returned. And suddenly, everything I knew about life seemed wrong. Why does a person so full of life disappear like that, without explanation? There was no illness. There was no warning. There was just an absence that no one could fill. That day, I learned something I never forgot. The void is heavier than anything you can hold in your hands. It doesn't take up space, but it takes up everything. It's silent, but it screams in our memories. And most cruelly, he never comes with answers. My childish mind tried to look for explanations. Maybe my grandmother was sleeping. Maybe he was in a secret place and would come back to surprise us. But no one seemed to know what to say. Adults whispered things about God's will, but God never explained anything to me. So, over time, I stopped asking. But the emptiness doesn't go away just because you stop asking. He waits patiently until you're ready to look at him again. I remember one night, I dreamed about my grandmother. She was in the kitchen, making dumplings. In the dream, she looked at me, smiled, and said something that seemed simple, but echoed like a revelation. "Things don't need to make sense to be beautiful, my son." I woke up with this phrase stuck in me. And even though I was so little, I realized that it wasn't about understanding. It was about accepting what I couldn't change, even when it didn't make sense. That memory followed me. I grew up with it, but I never fully understood it. The void returned other times, in different forms. In the silences between friends who moved away. In the goodbyes that came without warning. And always, the question that never left my head: why was Grandma in that box? What if I told you that this question wasn't just mine? void is there, next to you, waiting for you to also ask something that no one has ever explained to you. Throughout my life, I discovered that emptiness is not just absence. He's a strange, uncomfortable presence that forces you to look at places inside yourself that you don't want to face. It is, at the same time, the pain of loss and the space for something new to be born. Deep down, that day next to the glass box was the beginning of a journey that I'm still trying to understand. But there's something I learned, and that you need to hear. Emptiness is not the end. It is a question, and what comes next depends on how you choose to answer it. And you know the strangest thing? Emptiness never completely disappears. It just changes shape. And this is something that I only managed to understand many years later. But that's a story for the next part. Have you ever felt like the universe is against you? Like, no matter how hard you run, something invisible is pulling you back? What if I told you that maybe it's not the universe, but the void, reminding you that it's always there? The feeling of emptiness doesn't only appear in big, memorable moments, like the loss of someone you love. It is hidden between the lines of everyday life, in the small and silent failures that we accumulate throughout our lives. Have you ever been stuck in a traffic jam, frustrated by a delay that seemed to be caused by pure evil of fate? The mind wanders, looking for someone to blame. It's the fault of traffic, the government, the universe. But deep down, it's something else that bothers you. It's the void. I remember one time I won a raffle. Nothing extraordinary, just a basic basket. But that day, it was like I had won the lottery. Until, on the way to get the prize, I got stuck in an endless traffic jam. I turned on the radio, trying to understand the reason for the delay. The response was so absurd, it seemed contrived. A protest by breakdancers. I was outraged. Why is this happening to me? But the anger didn't last. Traffic began to flow, and a few meters further, I discovered the real reason for the traffic jam. A serious accident. Ambulances, sirens, and faces that carried something much heavier than my irritation. It was a punch in the gut. While I was complaining about wasted time, other people were missing out on something much bigger. And that's exactly what the void does. He turns every inconvenience into an existential crisis. It pushes us into a spiral of questions that seem to have no end. Why is this happening to me? Why doesn't anything go right? Why do I feel this way? And as you try to answer, you realize that the questions only increase. The void is a master at transforming noise into silence, and this silence screams louder than any sound. It appears when you're alone at home, scrolling through your phone feed for no reason, when you go out with friends and feel like no one really sees you, or when work seems like a meaningless loop. It hides on nights when sleep doesn't come, and on days when the alarm clock feels like a sentence. But do you know what's worse? It is not the presence of emptiness. That's what it does to our perception. Because when he arrives, everything seems worse. The void has this strange ability to distort reality, to make you believe that nothing has value, not others, not yourself. But what if I told you that the void has a purpose? That it is not there to defeat you, but to provoke you to see something you haven't yet realized. Emptiness, like that traffic jam, reminds reminds us that our perspective is limited. It makes us question our priorities, our choices, and most importantly, our expectations. Maybe in that raffle I won, the real prize wasn't the food basket, but the lesson I took home. The universe is not against me. He's just chaotic and sometimes cruelly indifferent. This understanding does not eliminate emptiness, but it changes the way we deal with it. When you start to see it as part of the human experience, it loses some of its power to crush you. It stops being a black hole and turns into a mirror. And in that mirror, you begin to see something that was always there, but that you never noticed. The little moments that are worth it. The smell of fresh coffee in the morning. The warm touch of someone you love. Laughter at a bad joke that only you thought was funny. Emptiness is a reminder that even when it seems like everything is lost, there is always something that can pull you back. And sometimes that something isn't big or epic. It's a simple gesture, an instant of connection. So why keep fighting the void? Maybe it's time to listen to it. If you've made it this far, it's because something in this story resonated with you. Perhaps you have felt emptiness in a moment of loss, in a traffic jam, or simply in the silence of an ordinary night. But now, you know you are not alone. If these reflections made you think or feel something new, I invite you to join this journey. Subscribe to the channel and like this video. It's not just a click. It is a step towards transforming the void into something that makes sense. Share this message with someone who, like you, may need to hear this today. Because at the end of the day, emptiness may be inevitable, but it never needs to be faced alone. And in the next part, we'll discover together how to turn emptiness into a force that moves rather than paralyzes. After all, what is your emptiness trying to teach you? Have you ever looked in the mirror and not recognized who was there? As if suddenly you had become a stranger within yourself. The void has this ability. It infiltrates our thoughts, and before we know it, we are staring at a reflection of someone we can't explain. When emptiness becomes a constant companion, it is no longer just an absence. He is a silent voice, an invisible weight that makes us question everything. Who we are, what we want, why we keep trying. I remember a time in my life when he seemed to be more present than ever. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't anger. It was as if a veil had been placed over the world. The colors were there, but muted. The words came, but without force. And the silence seemed to scream louder than any noise. But why is the void so persistent? Does he really want to destroy us? Or is he trying to tell us something we don't yet understand? Psychologists have an interesting theory. Emptiness is often a reflection of expectations we created that, in some way, were frustrated. We want to be happy, but we don't know what happiness means. We want to be whole, but we avoid looking at the broken parts within us. And that's where the emptiness comes in. He doesn't fill you with answers. It forces you to face the questions. It seems cruel, doesn't it? But sometimes, what seems cruel is necessary. Imagine a wound that has never been treated. You can cover it with band-aids, ignore it, and move on. But at some point, it will become infected. Emptiness is like that insistent doctor who forces you to look at the wound, even when all you want to do is pretend it's not there. But what about when emptiness not only forces us to look, but paralyzes us? This is the most dangerous part. When emptiness is not faced, it begins to steal our energy, our connections, and eventually our will to move forward. It turns each day into a meaningless repetition, where even the things that once gave us pleasure seem distant. The void whispers that nothing matters. And if we're not paying attention, we start to believe. But there is a way out. It's not magic nor fast, but it's real. It starts with something that seems simple, but is incredibly difficult. Accepting emptiness as part of us, not running away from it, not desperately trying to fill it, but recognizing it. Because deep down, the void is not the villain. It is a reflection of our deepest questions. And here's the surprise. The void only has power over us because we believe it is the end. But what if it is the beginning? When I started to see emptiness in a different way, everything changed. I stopped fighting him and started listening to what he was trying to say. And what he said was this: you're lost because you're trying to be someone you're not. The emptiness made me realize that I was living to meet other people's expectations while completely ignoring my own. And you? Have you ever stopped to think if the emptiness you feel is, in fact, an invitation to rediscover yourself? Once, while dealing with this feeling, I came across a phrase that changed my perspective. Empty is not the opposite of fullness. It is the space where fullness can be born. This is not something you understand right away. But over time, I realized that the void was giving me a gift. The chance to create something new, something of my own, something true. And that's exactly what the void does. He destroys what no longer serves to make room for what really matters. But what to do while we are in the middle of this process? How to deal with discomfort, doubt, weight? The answer is simpler than it seems. You start small. You find something, anything, that makes sense to you in that moment. A gesture, a thought, one action. For me, it was as simple as starting to write. Every word I put on paper was like a conversation with the void. And little by little, he began to respond. Not with words, but with a kind of peace I had never felt before. Maybe emptiness is not your enemy. Maybe he will be your guide. And in the next part, we'll explore how to turn this relationship into something that can change your life forever. If you felt like these words resonated with something inside you, subscribe to the channel and like this video. It's not just a gesture. It is a choice to continue this journey together. After all, the void is always around, but it doesn't need to be faced alone. And now I ask you, what is your emptiness trying to teach you today? What if the void was not something to be defeated, but understood? Have you ever stopped to think that perhaps it is trying to teach you something that only it can reveal? The void has always been seen as the great villain of human existence. It's what paralyzes us, keeps us up at night, and makes us doubt everything. But in fact, it could be something quite different. A portal. Not an easy portal to cross, nor one that offers guarantees, but one that, when crossed, can completely transform the way we see life. I remember a specific day during a particularly difficult time. I was sitting on the floor of my room, surrounded by things that were supposed to make me happy. Books I loved, photos of good times, achievements I worked so hard to achieve. But looking at it all felt empty. No matter how much I had, something always seemed to be missing. Have you ever felt this way? As if nothing is enough, even when, theoretically, you have everything? It was at that moment that I came across research that changed my way of looking at emptiness. A study conducted by Harvard University revealed something surprising. The people who reported the most satisfaction in life were not those who had the most money or success. They were the ones who could find meaning in the little things, in the present moment, in real connections, in simple acts of gratitude. This idea hit me like lightning, because up until that point, I was obsessed with the idea of filling the void. I looked for answers in achievements, in material goods, even in people. But I had never stopped to ask, what if the void doesn't need to be filled? What if it needs to be heard? Perhaps the void is not a hole to be filled, but a space for something new to be born. This shift in perspective is what led me to start a simple but powerful practice, sitting with emptiness, literally. I started my days by taking 5 minutes to do nothing but feel him. No distractions, no attempts to escape. Just me, the void, and the silence. At first, it was terrible. My mind struggled, my thoughts screamed. But little by little, something began to change. Did you know that our mind processes an average of 60,000 thoughts per day? And most of them are repetitions of what we thought yesterday. Emptiness, when faced, forces us to break out of this cycle. It forces us to observe thoughts as they really are. Echoes, noises, often unnecessary. It was in this uncomfortable silence that I began to hear the most important questions. Who are you trying to impress? Why are you so stuck on what you've already been through? What really matters to you? These questions didn't come with ready-made answers, but they gave me something even more valuable: clarity. But here's the moment to breathe. What if emptiness wasn't your enemy? What would you do differently today? Over time, I realized that emptiness can also be a bridge. It connects what we are now to what we can become. Think of a blank sheet of paper. For many, it is intimidating, but for others, it is an opportunity, a space where everything is possible. The void, when looked at in this light, stops being something to fear and becomes a powerful ally. This reminds me of the story of Viktor Frankl, a psychotherapist who survived the horrors of the Nazi concentration camps. He lost almost everything: his family, his home, his freedom. But in the midst of this devastating void, Frankl found purpose. He realized that even when everything is taken away from you, you still have one choice: to give meaning to your experience. Frankl wrote, "When we can no longer change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." These words resonate with the essence of what it means to accept emptiness. It's not about giving up or resigning yourself, but about choosing to look at it as fertile ground for something new. But what about you? When was the last time you chose to change your perspective instead of fighting what you can't control? Acceptance of emptiness is not passivity. It's courage. It's looking within and saying, it's okay to not have all the answers right now. It's okay to feel lost. because this is the space where I can start to find myself. And you know what's most interesting? When you stop desperately trying to fill the void, it loses its power to scare you. It becomes quieter, lighter. Not because it disappears, but because you learn to live with it. Ultimately, emptiness is not the end. It is the gap between what you were and what you are becoming. It is the space where you can rewrite your story, reconnect with yourself, and find meaning that is truly yours. If you've made it this far, it means something inside you is ready to hear this message. Don't ignore this. Take the next step. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share with someone who may be facing the same thing. Because just as the void can be a bridge to what you are looking for, your actions can be a bridge to those who need this reflection. And now, I ask you, what are you willing to create from the space that the void left in you? What if everything you've experienced up until now, all the pain, all the silence, all the emptiness, was preparing you for something bigger? The void, as frightening as it may seem, is not the villain. He is the space between what we were and what we can be. And now that you've reached the end of this journey, I want you to think about something important. The void was never about what you lost. He was always about what you can still find. Think about all the questions that emptiness forced you to face. Why am I here? What really matters? What do I want to build from now on? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are also the starting point for something transformative. I remember the first time I really understood this. It was during an unexpected conversation with a friend I hadn't seen in years. He had experienced devastating losses, a broken marriage, the loss of a loved one, and even the failure of a business he loved. When I asked how he managed to continue, he smiled in a way that seemed to carry a peace I didn't understand, and said, "I stopped fighting the void and started asking what it wanted to teach me." Those words stayed with me for a long time. And little by little, I realized that the answer to emptiness is not outside of us. It's not in achievements, possessions, or even other people. It lies in our ability to make sense of what, at first glance, seems unbearable. Emptiness is an invitation to create the life we want, not the life we were told we should live. Science also teaches us something powerful about this. Positive psychology researchers have found that moments of crisis, such as periods when we feel emptiness most intensely, can be catalysts for personal growth. This is what they call post-traumatic growth, the ability to find purpose and strength in adversity. It is not romanticizing pain, but recognizing that it can be transformed. And you? Have you ever thought about what could emerge from this space that the void left in you? When we accept that emptiness is not an enemy, we begin to see what really matters. It's not the big answers or the perfect plans, but the little things. A moment of true connection with someone, the courage to try something new, or even the simple act of allowing yourself to rest. And in the end, it's not the void that defines us. It's what we choose to do with it. Maybe you still feel like something is missing, and that's normal. Because the truth is that we all carry a little of this emptiness with us. It is part of what makes us human. But now, you know that it doesn't have to be a burden. It can be a place of possibilities, of questions that lead to answers, of silences that create space for something new. If you've made it this far, I want you to know you're not alone. We all, at some point, face emptiness, and together we can learn to transform it. So, here's the invitation. If this video touched you, subscribe to the channel. It's not just a symbolic gesture. It's a commitment to continue this conversation, to deepen these reflections, to create a space where emptiness can be understood, not feared. Like this video and share with someone who might need to hear this today. Sometimes a message like this arrives at the right time. And before finishing, I want to leave you with one last thought. Emptiness is not the end of the line. It is the starting point for something that you will still build. And this can be bigger and more beautiful than you imagine. Thank you so much for watching and for being part of this journey. In the next video, we will explore together another aspect of life that we often leave aside: how to find peace, even in the midst of chaos. I hope you're there. Until next time, and remember, emptiness can be the beginning of your rebirth.